In this video, we're talking about how to find the sum of two vectors. We're going to be doing two different examples. In the first problem, we have the vector u is equal to 1, negative 2, and the vector v is equal to 3, 4. So we want to find the sum of these two vectors. First of all, keep in mind that the format of these vectors, we've been given the direction numbers, but this is the same thing as saying u is equal to 1 times I, or just I, plus negative 2 times j, which would just be minus 2j. So this vector u is the exact same as this vector u. We could also rewrite v if we wanted as 3i plus 4j. So you'll see both formats. Either way, when we want to sum the two vectors together, we'll call the sum of the vectors w. So we'll say w is going to be equal to, and we just add together the coefficients on I, or these first numbers here, so we would have 1 plus 3. And then for the second number, we add together the coefficients on j, or these two numbers here. So we would say negative 2 plus 4. Then when we simplify, we get w is equal to 1 plus 3 is 4, negative 2 plus 4 is a positive 2, so the sum of these two vectors is the vector 4, 2. Now the way that that plays out graphically, if we sketch these on an xy coordinate system, so we would say u is equal to 1, negative 2. So if we just use the origin as our starting point, we would go over along the x-axis 1 unit, and down along the y-axis 2 units, and that would give us a vector that looks like this and ends up at 1, negative 2. Now if we wanted to graph the vector 3, 4, we would just go out along the x-axis 3 units, and then we would go up along the y-axis 4 units, and we would end up out 3 and then up to 4 would be right here, right about there. So when we add the two vectors together, all we're saying is that we're going to take one of the vectors and we're going to place its initial point at the terminal point of the other vector. So for example, if we started with v, the vector v here in green, and then we added to that the vector u, it's like taking the initial point of u and instead of starting it at the origin, starting it at the terminal point of v. And so again, because u is 1, negative 2, if we start at this terminal point, we would just go over 1 unit along the x-axis and then down 2 units along the y-axis, and we'd end up right about here. So basically what we've done is we said that we had the vector here u, so this is the vector u, and that went to the point 1, negative 2. Then we had the vector v here, and that went to the point 3, 4. And then when we added them together, we just sort of translated u so that its initial point was at the terminal point of v, and we got to this new terminal point here. So now the sum of u and v is the vector w, and if we draw w, if we sketch w, what we're going to find is that we end up at this same terminal point. So we start at the origin, we go out 4 units because w is 4, 2, so we go out to 4 and we go up to 2, and we find that we get to that same point right there. So this vector here, w, is the sum of u and v, and it's the vector 4, 2. Notice that we could also do the exact same thing. Instead of starting with v and then adding u to it, we could start with u and then add v to it. We would just start at this terminal point of u, and we would find that v ended up right here as well. And so then we would see that w, 4, 2, connects to that terminal point. So let's do a second example here. In this case, we have u is 3i plus 5j, and v is 2i minus 7j. So keep in mind that this is the exact same thing as u equals 3, 5, and v equals 2, negative 7. So if we want to add them together, we're just going to get w is equal to 3 plus 2, comma, 5 plus negative 7, or 5 minus 7. So then we would get w is equal to 5, comma, negative 2. And if we wanted to sketch that, we would say that u is 3, 5. So we would come out here to 3, and then we would come up to 5, and our vector would look like this approximately. And then if we wanted to sketch v, we would start at the origin, and we would go over 2, and then down to negative 7, which is off of our graph a little bit, but it would look something like this. And then if we wanted to sketch the sum of the two vectors w, we would say w is 5, negative 2, so we would start at the origin, we would come out to 5, and then we would go down to negative 2, and the vector would look something like that. And this would be w here, so we could call this w, we could call this u, and we could call this v. And you could see that w looks like it could be the sum of u and v. So that's how you find the sum of two vectors.